According to some recent news articles, it appears that serial overactor and aspiring cult leader Jared Leto has been accused by 9 women of what they termed predatory, terrifying, and unacceptable behavior. And to be clear, they weren't talking about his acting. So, it seems the legendary artistic genius that brought us a new take on the Joker and perhaps the greatest vampire meme film Morbius has been accused of running about with his little Jared exposed and asking young girls if they had, licked the lollipop, as it were. You know, I guess it might be worth checking to see if he uttered, "It's Morbin time," prior to these incidents because, it might have all simply been method acting. I think perhaps the best encapsulation of the entire affair came from a Los Angeles-based DJ and music producer who uploaded an old Facebook post of hers in which she noted, "You're not really in LA until Jared Leto tries to force himself on you backstage in a kilt and a snow hat." To be honest, that sounds like business casual for Jared Leto. Alright, so all joking aside, we do need to bear in mind that Jared Leto is innocent until proven guilty, and everything that's being said about him up to this point is still accusations. Nevertheless, Jared Leto annoys the crap out of me. He is an insufferable tryhard. Still, I really hope he didn't do the things that he's being accused of, but
it's Hollywood, baby.
And I mean, for me, once I found out that Bill Cosby was capable of this, I feel like anybody in Hollywood is capable of it. It's hard to imagine that they're not, given that situation. But to get to the point, the reason that this actually matters is that Tron Ares is coming out in October, and the outlook for that film was not great prior to this, and this only makes it worse.
That's not good.
So why was the outlook not so great prior to this? So I want to go through that a little bit, look at the first Tron movie, then look at Tron Legacy, and then compare some of the pieces from Tron Legacy to what we have coming up in Tron Ares to explain why I feel like the outlook for this film is looking a little shaky at best. So first, to talk a little bit about the original Tron. The original Tron was like the perfect blending of sci-fi and gamer nerd world. It was The Matrix before The Matrix. However, it was a financially poorly performing film. It cost $17 million to make, and according to the numbers.com, it only had a $27 million box office. Now, some people might say, well, if you look at the Wikipedia, it claims that it made $50 million. However, the Variety article that it's linking to that can no longer be accessed, so we can't verify that anywhere on the internet. I might be wrong on this, but at least with the information that I can verify, $27 million is it. With a $27 million box office, you're looking at a generous profit margin of 37%. And what I mean by generous is that's not accounting for any potential marketing costs or the cut of the ticket sales that the movie theaters get. If we want a more realistic profit margin, which the way of doing that is to multiply the reported budget by about 2.5 in the current era. Given how old this film is, I just multiplied the budget by 1.5. Now you're looking at a profit margin of about 5%, which means that Disney only earned a nickel for every dollar of box office profit. Objectively, it's a 7+ film. It's a good film that has a cult following that truly loves it. So Tron Legacy came out in 2010, and two of the strongest points about it were the world, the actual construction of it, the computer graphics, the way that they did the light cycle battles, the visuals of it were amazing, and the Daft Punk soundtrack was on point. Olivia Wilde, so hot. However, then you also have CGI Jeff Daniels, which was not so good. And again, in the end, it financially underperformed. It had a budget of $200 million and a reported box office, according to the numbers.com, of $399 million. Now, the generous profit margin of that's about 50%, meaning Disney would have made about 50 cents for every dollar of box office profit. However, again, we need to account for the marketing costs and the cut that the movie theaters take from the tickets. So if we multiply that budget, the reported budget, by 2.5, we get a profit margin of negative 25%. Meaning realistically, it seems like Disney lost a quarter for every dollar of box office profit that came in. Objectively, the film is above average. If you look at the critic ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a 51%, meaning there's a 51% chance that the average critic is going to find it above average. And then on Metacritic, it's got a 49%, meaning that it averaged about a 4.9 according to critics. Then if you look at the audience response, you've got Rotten Tomatoes at 64%, so the average audience member has a 64% chance of rating the film above average. Metacritic, you've got 72%, which means it ranged at about a 7.2, and then IMDb at 6.8. So overall, you kind of get the image that this film, again, ranges somewhere above a 7, somewhere around a 6.5 to a 7.5, somewhere in that area.
Not bad. Not bad at all.
The thing that hurt Tron Legacy the most was the story. The world was beautiful, the soundtrack was beautiful, so the visuals, so much of the kind of surrounding bits were really good. The thing that damaged the film, though, was that the story aspect of it was a bit weak. So that said, I feel like the upcoming Tron Ares is going to be financially and objectively a downgrade from Legacy. Almost every piece of it seems to be indicating that this film is potentially going to be significantly worse. And I have 5 reasons for that. So I'm going to go through each one of them. First, I'm going to talk about the director. Then I'm going to talk about the screenplay and the writers. Then we're going to talk a little bit about Mr. Leto. Then we're going to talk about the music. And finally, the production company. So, starting with reason number 1. So who is the director of Tron Legacy? This is Joseph Kosinski. So for those of you that don't obsessively check these kind of details, this is the director of Top Gun Maverick. He also directed Oblivion, which is an objectively good movie, though it financially performed pretty poor. And then he also is the director of F1, which is currently in the theaters right now, and by all accounts seems to be tracking well financially, and the reviews also seem to be quite positive. So he's got several films behind him that seem to have performed pretty well. Now, let's add into that he studied mechanical engineering and architecture in university. That's the things that he got his advanced degrees in. And he also made his name in Hollywood by directing 2 of the most famous video game trailers. So one of them was for Halo and the other one was for Gears of War. Now think about all of those things in combination, not necessarily the history of the films that he's directed post Legacy, but the things he'd done prior to being selected as the Legacy director. He's an architect. He's a mechanical engineer. He has experience with computer graphics. He has experience with video games or understanding video game worlds or video game stories. This is the perfect combination of things to direct a Tron film.
Perfect.
So, who's replacing him as the director in Tron Ares? Now, the thing that I should note first is that Kosinski was slated to come back to direct the second film. However, it ended up in production hell for so long that they replaced him with a man named Garth Davis, who also dropped out, and then now they've moved on to choice number 3. So who is that? It's a man named, and I have to look down and look at it because it's a name I can't pronounce unless I look at it. It's Joachim Rønning, I believe is the way that you pronounce it. He's Norwegian. Sorry if I messed it up. But again, this is choice number 3. So what has this man directed? Well, first he co-directed a historical film about 12 years ago that was Oscar nominated. And this is, again, what puts him on the list of potentially good directors. However, as anybody that's not in the kind of snooty film world now knows, they are the only ones that care about the Academy Awards. That does not impress any of the rest of us. So what has he done besides that? He co-directed Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest, meaning Pirates of the Caribbean 5, the last one that they made, the one that performed financially the worst and was probably the worst story of all the ones that they made. Then he produced Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, the second live-action remake of the Maleficent films. And finally, he recently just directed a film called Young Woman in the Sea with none other than Daisy Ridley, the Star Wars killer, and that movie bombed. So we have Dead Man's Chest, Mistress of Evil, and Young Woman in the Sea. These are the 3 things this guy has directed. And none of these films are things that people are sitting around going, oh man, I really remember those. Those were bangers. Nope, none of them. They're all meh at the very best. And probably, to be honest.
Just so
So this director, to me, is a horse that Disney has kind of kept in their stable of like, this is a guy that won an Oscar at one point, and we will chuck him out to direct the ass-end sequels of things that we don't care so much about. this is the director we're getting. I think it should be obvious that we have a direct step down in terms of director. So that's one strike against Aries. Let's move on to reason number 2. So let's move on to the writers. For Legacy, there were 4 total writers, and it seems like they were split into 2 teams of 2 people each. So the first set of writers was Edward Kitsis and Adam Horowitz. Their main credits are Lost and Once Upon a Time. Sadly, Lost as a series has not gone down as something that was well written. And honestly, that is probably the biggest complaint that anybody has about Lost was the writing. And again, Once Upon a Time, it might have a lot of fans, but it's not something that's known for great writing. So then the second set of writers, we have Brian Klugman and Lee Sterenthal. And the main thing that they were recognized for was writing the words. Taking these things all together, we've got the main 2 writers worked on Lost and Once Upon a Time, which is not really a strong pedigree. Well, how about for Aries? Aries' first credited writer, the main credited writer, is a man named Jesse Wigato. What has he written? 2 episodes of Daredevil, Born Again. Yeah, the recent Disney Daredevil show that was lambasted for terrible writing and performed terribly. That is the main writer for Aries, a man that wrote for that show. This is a bad sign. However, to balance this out a little bit, the second credited writer is a man named David DiGilio. Apologies if I pronounced that wrong, but he was the main showrunner. It seems like he was one of the executive producers or one of the main people that worked on The Terminal List. The Terminal List is good. It's well written. It came from a book, so he doesn't really get credit for writing that, but nevertheless, it was objectively good. The one concern I have is that The Terminal List tends to be a bit dark and gritty and serious, and if that's the thing that this man is used to writing, that's not necessarily Tron. Still, Terminal List was good, so they get a plus for that. However, the last note is, if you look at the Wikipedia article, there is 10 other people, 10, who are credited with extra writing notes or writing ideas that got added into this. So who are these 10 magical people? We have Jez Butterworth, Brian Duffield, Justin Haith, Nicole Holofcener, Adam Horowitz, Eddie Kitsis. Those are the 2 writers from Legacy, if we remember. Tom McCarthy, Megan McDonnell, Jack Thorne, and Billy Ray all received off-screen additional literary material credit. So we have a Daredevil Born Again writer, bad. We have a Terminal List writer, good. And then we have 10 randos that have added in a bunch of stuff. I don't know about the rest of you, but that seems like a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and that usually ends poorly.
Oh, this is gonna hurt.
So if we add this all up, at the end of the day, I feel like at best, the writing is a push. So we've got Lost and Once Upon a Time versus Daredevil Born Again and The Terminal List. The problem is Lost and Once Upon a Time are bad, but not bad in a way that it's just like, oh God, this hurts my brain. It's so awfully awful. Born Again is in that category of brain deadly awful that just makes me want to go run out and play in traffic. Terminal List, though, is really good. So we have really bad, really good, and then meh and meh. It's a push at best. And this is the problem, is that Legacy's biggest issue was the writing. We definitely haven't improved as far as the writers go, and I think there is a distinct possibility, given that the main writer wrote for Born Again, it could also be a downgrade. But again, I'll be fair and just say it's a push at this point. So let's move on to reason number 3. All right, so now we get to talk about Jared Leto. Oh boy. Jared Leto, in my opinion, is an insufferable tryhard. He is a mixed bag as an actor at best, and he is absolutely god-awful at everything else he does. He is a terrible singer. He is a terrible rock star. He has a terrible fashion sense. The way that I've always imagined Jared Leto is kind of a childish knockoff of Johnny Depp. Like if you went into a preschool and you took a child and you like got them all huffed up on glue and like fed them a whole bunch of sugar and then showed them a picture of Johnny Depp and then said, make this. And then they made an art project, and that's Jared Leto. That's what he is. Now, all of my terrible bias aside, this is boosted by the fact that he is terrible as a lead actor for a couple reasons. So let's go through those. First, according to the numbers, he has been the lead or part of a lead in an ensemble in 9 films, 9 total films. Now let's look at how these performed financially, these 9 films. Well, the first thing we have to note is that 3 of them must immediately be removed from the analysis. Why? Well, because there's no data on 2 of them, namely The Outsider from 2017 and Chapter 27 from 2008. And then Mr. Nobody from 2013 needed to be removed from the financial analysis because it was such a fantastic bomb that it was a statistical outlier and it screwed up the rest of the analysis. Just to kind of reassure you on that point, the budget of that film was $46 million and the box office was $2 million. You can imagine the studio probably wasn't very happy with the performance of that film, regardless of how many people actually liked it. Whatever the critic scores were, the audience scores, it bombed. So then we go into the remaining 6 films in which he was either the lead or a lead in an ensemble. So we have Morbius, House of Gucci, The Little Things, Blade Runner 2049, Suicide Squad, and Urban Legend. The realistic profit margin for these films, if we try to account for the marketing costs and the portion of the box office that the movie theaters take away, which means that we have to multiply all of the reported budgets by 2.5. Once we've done that, his average profit margin when he plays the lead or a lead in an ensemble is negative 29%, meaning his films average losing 29 cents for every dollar of box office profit when he is the lead or a lead in an ensemble. Oof. Not a good sign. So how does he perform critically? Well, we'll put all 9 films in because the 3 that performed financially weird don't really mess this analysis up. So if we take all 9 films into account, how do his films perform? So for critics, on Rotten Tomatoes, they average a 40%, meaning there's a 40% chance that the average critic will find the film above average. Then on Metacritic, the score is 48%, meaning 4.8. The average score for his films when he's the lead or the lead in an ensemble is 4.8. That's below average.
Who are you who are so wise in the ways of science?
How about with audiences? How does he perform with audiences? I mean, he has his own cult. This must be much better. According to Rotten Tomatoes, 65%. So the average audience member has a 65% chance of finding the film above average. How about Metacritic? 67 or 6.7. That's, again, just barely above average. And then IMDb, 6.3. So now we're looking at a lead actor, or when he plays the lead, or is a lead in the ensemble. The films perform poorly financially and perform poorly critically. He is not a lead actor. He is not a financial boon to a film. All that said, let's move on to reason number 4, the music.
I fight for the users.
One thing to note here is, as I said at the beginning, Daft Punk's soundtrack for Tron Legacy was one of the greatest strengths of that film. So replacing them in this film was a very important aspect that they really needed to think about. So they went with 9 Inch Nails. Now it's important to note that it is being listed as 9 Inch Nails. This is a deviation from the way that these men generally credit themselves when they're making film soundtracks. They usually get listed in film soundtracks as Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, not the band 9 Inch Nails. Now, we're going to read into a comment that Trent Reznor actually said in response to this. They asked him how they were being credited in this film, and this was his response. It's as 9 Inch Nails, and I think it's influenced the way we approached scoring. It's going to be a little grittier, and it's just different. It's still the same 2 people, but we're in a different mindset. We feel like we can play by different rules a bit, and the people working on the film were excited about that, so we thought we'd try it, Reznor explained. So we've got an indication here now that both in the fact that they chose to go with the Nine Inch Nails moniker rather than their individual names, and the comment here that Trent's actually making, that this film might be pushed more towards a darker and grittier tone.
Right.
This is then supported by a comment made by the director in response to this whole idea that Nine Inch Nails was being attached to the film. So let's look at what the director had to say. As director, Joachim Röning tells Empire the shift from Daft Punk to Nine Inch Nails is indicative of where Ares is taking us. With Nine Inch Nails making the music, this installment will be a little grittier, a little bit more industrial, the filmmaker explains. It's been important for me to contrast the grid and the real world. In that sense, Nine Inch Nails lends itself perfectly into this new Tron world that we are creating. Add to that, just yesterday there was another article from Empire where Nine Inch Nails was talking about this, and they said, Nine Inch Nails tease precise and unpleasant Tron Ares score with not 1 second of orchestra. So now we have indications from the director, we have indications from the music, we have indications from the fact that they chose Jared Leto as the lead actor, and we have indications potentially from the second writer coming from the terminal list that this film is going to be darker, grittier, and more industrial. None of those things are bad in and of themselves. Neither are they good in and of themselves. But the one thing that I might draw from this that could be a connection is, what did darker, grittier, and more industrial do to the DCEU universe? It destroyed it. It polarized most people with things like Man of Steel, and especially with Batman vs. Superman. When they started going in that dark, gritty direction, there were a lot of people that really didn't like it.
Will you stop that? No.
And then this is the issue. Is dark, gritty, and industrial a tone that fits with Tron? I don't think it does. And I think that bodes ill for this film. Now, moving on to reason number 5, Disney. So here's the issue. If we look at Legacy, Legacy came out in December of 2010. That means it was prior to the decimation of the MCU. It was prior to all the live action slop. It was prior to the death of Star Wars. It was prior to the CGI move in the main Disney animation studios. It was prior to a whole mess of brand damage that Disney has systematically done to itself over the last 15 years.
Not a great plan.
If you then take this back and think about it, in 2010, the assumption that most people would have gone into when they went to go see Legacy was that the people creating it cared a lot about the property. If Disney has taught us nothing over the last 15 years, it's that they don't give the first flying crap about any of their properties, and they will destroy any of them in the hope of making money, even though the way that they're doing it is antithetical to making money. But that's where we're at with Disney.
Somebody's got to go back and get a shitload of dimes.
So the amount of brand trust that's been lost in those 15 years also has to be taken into account. And then when you think about the fact that Legacy didn't perform well, I think it's only logical to assume Ares will perform worse. So you're looking at a film, both films in fact, both Legacy and the original Tron, which again, like I said, are objectively good films that performed poorly and only really survive on the cult following of people that truly love them. Sadly, I think there are a lot of people that fit into that category that are probably looking at Jared Leto being added in and looking at Nine Inch Nails being added in and looking at them throwing in the third string quarterback as a director that are probably going to go, you don't really understand this thing that I loved and you're about to make something atrocious, so no.
No, this can't happen!
Thus, I feel like the only assumption that one can make at this point is that this film is going to be objectively and critically and performance-wise worse than Legacy. That said, let's move on to the conclusion. So as I said at the beginning, the outlook for Tron Ares is not good. And Jared Leto is only one very small part of that. Realistically, we've got a third string quarterback coming in as the director that's only really done Disney sequels. The writing team is a push at best, and as I said, writing was the biggest weakness that Legacy needed to address, and I don't think they've done that. Then you add in Jared Leto, who doesn't perform well either financially or critically as a lead actor, and now we have accusations going on top of that, which is only going to make that worse. It's going to exacerbate that problem. Then we get Nine Inch Nails replacing Daft Punk. Nine Inch Nails is a good band. They make good music, but the tone doesn't fit. Nine Inch Nails and David Fincher are a perfect marriage. David Fincher's tone and Nine Inch Nails' tone go together perfectly. Nine Inch Nails' tone and Tron tone do not. I don't see these things going together well, and realistically what I see here by adding in Nine Inch Nails is that they want to make this dark and gritty and grindy and gross, and I have a feeling that's going to take us somewhere we don't want to go. Finally then, you have Disney doing 15 years of brand damage, destroying so much of their IPs, destroying so much of the things, all this goodwill that had been built up over generations and generations just being slaughtered in the course of this 15 years. And that people in 2010 cared a lot more about Disney. There were a lot more fans. There were a lot more people willing to believe that they were going to make something good. In 2025, the assumption is if it's being made by Disney, it's probably slop. You add all that up, and the outlook for Tron Ares is not good. So that's my thoughts on the upcoming Tron Ares. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.